may the Solicitor General graciously respond to my questions. Thank you. Good morning, Chief.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Madam Solicitor General. Okay. Madam Solicitor General, from your opening statement and all through your responses to the relevant questions of the court so far, you have consistently invoked the wisdom of Congress in the enactment of the budget, which, according to you, is a political question, hence beyond the reach of judicial review. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, thank you very much. So what do you mean by the wisdom of Congress in the enactment of the budget?
Your Honor, the position of the Republic is that although we recognize the expanded judicial power of the Supreme Court, which is different from the U.S. Legal framework, because in our Constitution, we have explicitly expanded the judicial power, and that we recognize that there could also be a review if there has been grave abuse of discretion. It is our position that we will still have to look at the Constitution if there are textually demonstrable standards by which an act of a co-equal branch should be evaluated. Otherwise, we believe that the Supreme Court also, in many of its decisions, have given much respect and deference to co-equal branches when the power has been constitutionally provided to that co-equal branch, such that the power of the purse being given to the Congress will then have to be delimited also only by what has been constitutionally provided.
Very well, Madam Solicitor General. So it is your position that the invocation of wisdom standing alone is not a magic wand that compels the court to desist from reviewing a case where constitutional issues are involved.
Your Honor, the position of the Republic is that we would support that statement.
Yes. So wisdom is the ability to use one's accumulated knowledge, experience, and deep understanding to make sound judgments, good decisions, and act appropriately. Can you cite specific cases where the court deferred to the wisdom of Congress in the enactment of the GAA, and for what reason, and for that reason alone, desisted from reviewing questioned items in the GAA, even though the constitutionality of these items was challenged before the court?
Your Honor, may I confer with my team just to be able to identify
Yes,
a
please.
specific case? Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Oo.
Your Honor, with regard to the specific issue of GAA, we don't have a specific case now. We are able to, I'm able to remember like Tanyada versus Angara, where there were pronouncements by the court that if there is unconstitutionality, if there is an allegation of unconstitutionality with regard to an act of a co-equal branch, the Supreme Court will give much respect and deference. I would also be reminded of the standard of proof that was enunciated by Justice Zalameda in the municipality of San Mateo versus Smart Communications, where Justice Zalameda said that if there is an allegation of unconstitutionality, the standard of proof is that the petitioners should prove beyond reasonable doubt. And it is a corollary principle to the presumption of constitutionality by a co-equal branch. And Your Honor, with your indulgence, if we may be allowed to submit a case to research on a specific GAA case to answer your question.
Please do that, Madam Solicitor General.
Thank
In
you,
the
Your Honor.
cases that you cited, did the court defer to the wisdom of the executive in sustaining the validity or constitutionality of a specific law? Or is it because the petitioners failed to master the quantum of evidence required?
In the municipality of San Mateo, Your Honor, it's the second one that the petitioners failed, and which is also our position in this case, that the petitioners have not alleged or have not discharged the burden of proof that is imposed upon them.
Yes, that's true. So, the invocation of wisdom alone is not enough. If we examine the cases of the Supreme Court, deferring to the wisdom of the political departments of the government, it is only because the invocation of wisdom, or the principle that we must respect the wisdom of the political departments, is just an aside. It's just an additional ground. And it's never cited as the lone ground in sustaining the constitutionality of a questioned law or issuance. Do you agree?
Your Honor, I would agree that since the 1987 Constitution, the political question, in fact, has been really set aside because of the expanded judicial power. Your Honor, in my notes, because I also am remembering a case which is Tanyada versus Angara, but this is not a GAA case. This was about the WTO, but when I read it, I noted it down as a note for the Supreme Court not reviewing the wisdom. This is by Chief Justice Panganiban, and there were excerpts where the Supreme Court said that the responses to the questions on whether entering the WTO would bring more prosperity, employment, purchasing power, that they involve judgment call by our policymakers for which they are answerable to our people during appropriate electoral exercises. And if I may, Your Honor, it went on to say, again, referring to the burden of proof, it said that we find no patent and gross arbitrariness or despotism by reason of passion or personal hostility in such exercise, which we believe, Your Honor, is the standard for grave abuse of discretion. So I agree, Your Honor, political question, we won't stop at the issue of whether it is a political question, because the Supreme Court would have the power to determine if there has been grave abuse of discretion. And it is just our submission that then the Constitution we will still look at the Constitution if it has provided for the parameters by which the Honorable Court will have to evaluate. Otherwise, if there are no textually demonstrable standards, then that means that in certain powers which have been lodged constitutionally by the constitutionally to the other co-equal branches, then the judiciary will be given a special position to supplant its policy or wisdom on powers that were given constitutionally to the other branches.
Madam Solicitor General, the court doesn't supplant. The court nullifies or sets aside, but never supplants its wisdom over the wisdom of the political departments. That is not the role of the judiciary.
I submit, Your Honor, I say it without intention to put in a negative light. I might have misappreciated, Your Honor.
It's all right,
We submit, Your Honor.
Madam Soljan. That's well taken. So, I'd like to stress that the case that you mentioned, Municipality of San Mateo versus Smart, is a division case. First division, where Justice Alameda sits as a member, as a senior member at that. So, are you still invoking it?
Your Honor, I have in my notes also, because the Municipality of San Mateo is just one. If I may go to my notes, Your Honor, to be able to share the other cases.
Actually, you may invoke it because the Chief Justice also sits as chair in that
It's a
division.
decision, so it's okay.
Yes.
Because the division is part of the Supreme Court
Yes,
itself.
of the law of the land.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right. So, on the other side of the fence, can you please cite specific cases where the court nullified specific items in the GAA for being unconstitutional, notwithstanding the government's invocation of wisdom on the part of its political departments, such as the executive and the legislature?
Your Honor, I think it's the Belgica versus Ochoa, where was it the Countryside Development Fund? Alin ba yung CDF? Alin yung PDAF? The Belgica, in the Belgica case, the Supreme Court nullified the PDAF for its undue delegation to the legislature. It's a post-enactment intervention by the legislature in choosing which are the programs to be funded, and there was also a provision of a certain amount to legislators after the legislation, which stage is given to the executive, but the legislature was in fact given the power to interfere.
Yes, very well, Madam Solicitor General. I was hoping you would mention the PhilHealth, where you did not file a motion for reconsideration. And the Filipino people thank you for that.
And of course, I thank also the Supreme Court for the wisdom in that case, Your
Yes.
Honor. Thank you.
And we did not supplant the wisdom of the executive and
Yes,
the
Your Honor.
legislature. In the DBM's website, unprogrammed appropriations are defined as those which provide standby authority to incur additional agency obligations for priority programs or projects when revenue collection exceeds targets and when additional grants or foreign funds are generated. What do you mean by standby fund? From your understanding.
Standby appropriations, Your Honor, mean that the triggers are identified, and if and when the trigger is met, therefore the programs, activities, and projects will then can then be funded. So it is contingent on the realization or on the existence of the triggers.
Yes, so it is ready or held in reserve, correct?
No, Your
Held in reserve. That is how the dictionary defines it. It is ready for use. Is that correct? Or we don't agree with the dictionary's definition?
No, Your Honor, because there is yet no fund, and it is dependent on the meeting of the targets and if there will be an excess in the target.
Yes, so there is reservation but no funds. Correct? Yes, even though we have not collected yet, we're reserving the funds already.
Yes, so to speak, Your Honor. So
Yes.
if it will happen, then that fund will can be used for the unprogrammed appropriations.
So if it doesn't happen, there will be no standby funds.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. All right. So does standby funds necessarily connote an emergency which is not covered by the programmed appropriations?
Your Honor, if I may clarify, I don't remember that we defined or we used the term standby fund.
No,
but it's,
only DBM does. Only DBM does in its website. So you're debunking the definition of DBM?
well, Your Honor, I remember in our briefings that we were discussing standby appropriations. I remember them sharing with me the definition of a standby appropriation, but not a standby fund. If I may be corrected, Your Honor, we have the representative from the DBM, if it would be okay with you if I could
please.
clarify and be
Yes.
corrected also.
Okay, what is meant by standby fund? Do we have a special definition that is contrary to the ordinary meaning of standby funds?
Your Honor, so also my team confirms that our understanding is there's no reserve fund, but it is
There is no reserve
there's
fund.
no reserve fund.
But Only earmarked.
Okay, the reason why I hesitated and paused, Your Honor, is that when earmark, it is my understanding that there should be real funds that are there, but in this case, it is conditional. There is no fund yet.
Conditional reserve. You can say that it's a conditional reserve. So if it is generated, so be it. If there is no generated fund, there is no reserve. Reserve is just an abstract, right?
Yes, Your Honor. I would agree with your explanation, Your Honor.
All right. So it's, ma'am, yes. Yes, please.
Magandang umaga po.
Magandang umaga sa'yo.
I am Andrea Magtalas po from the DBM.
Opo.
For clarification po, the DBM defines unprogrammed appropriations that as they provide standby authority for the agencies to incur additional agency obligations for priority programs and projects.
Yes.
So we confirm that definition, but we clarify humbly that it would be the authority, the authorization of the legislature, and the appropriation that is on standby, and the funds are merely earmarked.
So, standby does not mean to be incurred. There must be an emergency. There must be an urgency. That is the meaning of standby. As far as DBM is concerned.
As far as DBM is concerned, the authority granted by the legislative through the unprogrammed appropriations is a standby appropriation, which allows us, if triggers are met, the existence of the triggers are certified, to release the allotment necessary for the agencies.
So we're not speaking of any urgency. We're not speaking of any emergency when we provide unprogrammed appropriation.
The unprogrammed appropriations as legislated would be dependent on the priority programs and projects not covered by the programmed appropriations and are deemed necessary, such as foreign assisted projects that do not yet have final loan agreements, which it could happen during the fiscal year.
All right. So on one hand, we have deficit, budget deficit. Is the funding of the deficit certain? Or it also depends on whether we could generate the funds to cover the budget deficit.
When the DBM submits, when the executive submits through the DBM, the budget, BESF, Budget of Expenditure and Sources of Financing, there is an anticipated level of deficit. We are working on a deficit.
Yes, correct.
budget.
So anticipated deficit. And do you have anticipated sources for this deficit?
Yes.
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 Pretty much like unprogrammed appropriation. Unprogrammed appropriation is another form of deficit. Correct? Because there are no existing funds. But we are providing the programs and projects because we anticipate funding. Correct? Yes?
Your Honor, may I be allowed to
Yes,
answer?
please,
Okay.
Solicitor General.
It is our position that the unprogrammed appropriations are not deficit-inducing. In fact, they are generally neutral because the sources of funds are identifiable, contingent. If there is excess,
Yes.
then the source of fund will be ready, and therefore it should not produce a deficit because the source of fund is identified.
Yes. So, I don't disagree with that. I fully agree. And I would like to emphasize again that the contingency funds that will cover the deficit on one hand, all right, is the status of the deficit to be covered by funds that the government may or may not be able to raise is similar to the nature of the funds that we will raise still in the future to cover unprogrammed appropriations. That is the similarity that I would like to emphasize. Correct? The
Yeah.
uncertainty, the contingency, they're both non-existent when the unprogrammed, when the GAA was enacted. Do you agree?
Your Honor, if I may, with regard to the deficit target, it is our understanding, and please correct me, ASEC Angel, that even that the target is planned, discussed, deliberated on. Okay, so meaning the BESF will include all the sources of financing, and the financing could be local borrowings or foreign borrowings, and the DBCC, and in their discussions, there is in fact a target that they wish to be within and not breach.
Yes.
And all of those, based on the BESF, will be observed in the operations of the government. And that's why it is our position that since it has been planned as well, it's usually a range. I think it's a 5% to 7% deficit target, which is a big amount. And therefore, even the borrowings go already into the equation of meeting that deficit target. Now, in regard to the unprogrammed appropriations, if I may make a delineation, a respectful delineation of excess and surplus, because what the UAs are based on would be an excess in the collection of the revenue target and not surplus, which surplus they have been trying to explain to us this technical term. Surplus would refer to the definition revenue, you spend more than you earn.
Yes.
You earn more
More
than you spend.
All right.
That is a surplus. So the expenditure is in the equation of a
Yes.
surplus, while in the excess, it just pertains to the excess in the collection.
Yes, that's very well explained, Madam Solicitor General. But it doesn't deviate from my point that the funds intended to cover the deficit are still uncertain whether they may actually be raised on one hand. On the other, the UAs also have no funding, but we have triggers. And whether we will be able to achieve funding from these triggers, or whether the triggers themselves may even occur, is uncertain. That is my point, the uncertainty of both funding for the deficit and funding for the UAs. All right, I will go to my other point. Yes, you are excused, ma'am. Thank you. So, we cannot liken from your from your definition of standby funds. Standby funds is not for emergency, it's not for any urgent projects of the government. Okay. But do you say that the programmed appropriation, the projects or programs under this category are urgent and matters of emergency?
Your Honor, the unprogrammed appropriations, the PAPs, projects, activities, programs, are not, I would not describe them as emergency, because the programmed appropriations would have the contingent fund. Meron bang emergency fund? Emergency funds, a programmed appropriation? Or there's the calamity fund and the contingent fund, which are all in the programmed. The unprogrammed appropriations are also PAPs that are deemed important by the executive and the legislature, but because of the limited fiscal space, they are, I think, forced to put them in the unprogrammed appropriations and wait for excess in the collection of their committed
All right.
revenues.
So there are no urgent projects under the programmed appropriation.
Your Honor, there could be, but it is not the essential characteristic of the unprogrammed appropriations, because, for example, the foreign assisted projects, from the executive point of view, will then be urgent. There is a timing dimension to it. I think that if the executive does not foresee it being approved right away, then it goes to the UA and not the programmed appropriation because of the timing.
All right. So there are also urgent and emergency projects under the UAs.
There could be, Your Honor, like the
Yes.
FAPs.
Okay, so it's not correct to say that the UAs cover non-emergency or non-urgent projects.
Yes, Your Honor, I would not describe it as a common descriptor to all, but
Yes.
they are important to the
Important
executive.
but not urgent, not emergency.
Not emergency.
Okay,
Your Honor.
while the programmed projects are a mix of urgent and non-urgent.
The programmed appropriations, we could say that, Your Honor.
Yes. All right. So actually they can overlap, right? Yes.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. So they can be moved from unprogrammed, though it is urgent, it can be moved to unprogrammed. And unprogrammed can be moved to programmed.
Yes, Your Honor. I think that was also what happened. And how it was explained to us is that, again, in reference to the two-envelope framework that the executive has been guided through the years, that the funding for the appropriations that are meant for the operations of the government would be the programmed, and those that the legislature can live without those programs because it is contingent on the happening of the triggers, then
Are moved to unprogrammed.
would go to unprogrammed,
Yes.
Your
So
Honor.
in terms of hierarchy of value, all right, the programmed priorities, programmed appropriation is on top.
Yes, Your Honor, that is correct. And in fact, also the effect is that after being included in the GAA, it already automatically, as a general rule, will have a GAA, the allotment order. While the UAs, you will have to go through the SARO approval and a certification from the Bureau of Treasury that there is the existence of the excess
Yes.
funds.
So the standby fund may or may not be realized.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. So we cannot. Can you liken the standby fund to a generator, which switches on automatically or manually once there is brownout?
There is the comparison, Your Honor, in the sense that if there's a trigger, an event that will trigger its happening,
The trigger
then
is
it's
the
correct.
brownout
Yes, Your Honor.
and the availability of the generator.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes. So in that sense, is it a standby generator?
Yes, Your Honor,
Yes.
it's a generator.
To provide current or light where the regular supply runs out. Correct?
Your Honor, that last description, it's actually exceeding the collection. So it doesn't run out, but the executive has exceeded its targets.
Even though in the meantime, the budget deficit has not been fully covered.
Your Honor, it's the point that we hope to clarify. So again, and maybe if okay with you, to ask for the expertise of our budget secretaries, because it is our understanding that the deficit is actually, there is a lot of intention to it and deliberateness as to what will be the source, how much will be borrowed, and that's already, they have a formula and they have an equation for it.
It's all right. I will go to my next question. So, you speak of priority programs or projects. Okay. Can you cite examples of priority programs or projects that were included in the unprogrammed appropriations of 2024, 2025, and 2026?
Wala. Your Honor, may I ask for a list of the unprogrammed
Yes,
appropriations?
please. TOR 25, 26.
Like yung AFP is binawasan. Yung iba nilagay sa... Yung 10 billion, di ba? Yung 10 billion. From 15 billion.
Your Honor, if I may request for the DBM representative to share the UA items.
All right. Yes, please. It's all right. Can you just submit to us the list of these priority programs? Are they listed as priority programs, or who categorized them as priority programs?
Your Honor, what we have here would be the list of UA purposes covered from 2016 to 2026. And one example of a priority program and project that is in the UA would be the revised AFP modernization program.
unprogrammed. All right, but isn't AFP modernization program a long-term program?
Yes,
Yes.
Your Honor.
Of how many years?
There are phases, but I think more than 10 years. I will
Yes, so
validate.
they're quite predictable, right? They're recurring in every GAA I could ever remember.
There is a portion of the revised AFP modernization program that is part of the programmed appropriations, but to provide possible additional cover for the program, there's also an amount included in the 2024 and 2025, among others.
Because they are
unprogrammed
funded in phases, correct?
Yes,
so,
Your Honor.
for every GAA year, this item is anticipated, correct? It's not emergency, it's not urgent. It is a recurring program of the government, which obviously assumes a priority, a priority or urgent consideration by the executive and the legislature. So why did you move it to unprogrammed when it is so programmed?
Honor, may I
Yes.
answer your question? Based on the clarification of ASEC Angel, the AFP modernization out of the recognition that it is an important program is also in the programmed appropriation, and a certain amount is also in the unprogrammed, just in case it will be added to. Now, I don't think, because of the fiscal space that limits the executive with regard to the programmed appropriations.
So what cannot be done directly insofar as the programmed appropriations are concerned can be done indirectly under the unprogrammed appropriations, which give a lot of fiscal space.
Your Honor, the unprogrammed appropriations, again, because the sources of funds are not for sure to happen, and that's why we likened it to like a list of programs that are important to the government, but they can in fact live with dispensing with them if the sources of funding will not happen.
When you retain it under program funds, and because of its inclusion, a deficit is incurred by the government. Okay. Funding will be uncertain as well. But nevertheless, we have certain sources to cover these funds. Okay. So why do we have to move it to unprogrammed funds when the funds are also uncertain?
Your Honor, since, in fact, even before the 1987 Constitution, so our executive has always included in their in the NEP the unprogrammed appropriations, and I think based on the presentation of our amici that it provided some kind of flexibility to our executive department, and the reason why I add that is since the power of the purse has been lodged in the Congress, and the planning and the execution are lodged in the executive, the targets or objectives of how they how they can perform with limited fiscal space would be given a lot of deference as well because of their many years of doing their job of the planning, legislation, and the execution of the budget, which is the contemporaneous construction of their power under the Constitution.
I agree, but only if it is untainted with grave abuse of discretion, not if it breeds corruption or bad governance.
Yes, Your Honor, it is our humble submission that, in fact, the vulnerability to corruption is not unique to the unprogrammed appropriations. It could also happen in programmed appropriations.
Correct, but it is enhanced. It is enhanced. All right. So, you maintain that there were certain criteria used by the legislature in shifting certain items from programmed to unprogrammed appropriation. Okay? And correct? Yes?
Yes, Your Honor, although I do not have the information because we thought that
In general,
it goes
correct?
Yes,
Yes,
Your
it
Honor.
goes to the wisdom, but it is also the duty of the government to lead us to the wisdom that led to this decision. Because that is a big consideration for the court to resolve this case in accordance with the Constitution. So, as I said before, the invocation of wisdom is not its own excuse for being. It is not a magic wand that once it is flushed, the court will automatically desist from reviewing the issues at hand. All right. So it is
Correct.
but fair for the Filipino people to be apprised of how this wisdom is exercised and how it came about. Okay, for example, the share of local government units in the collection of special privilege tax was categorized under programmed appropriations in the 2016 and 2017 GAAs. But under the 2024 and 2025 GAAs, it was shifted to the category of unprogrammed appropriations. What standards were used by Congress for doing so?
would you like to?
For the prior year LGU shares, Your Honor, in 2024 and 2025, the amounts were included in the unprogrammed appropriations because there is a need to certify the availability of such amount and that such amount certified be reconciled with the Bureau of Internal Revenue. So without such reconciliation...
That is the reason? You just want to reconcile the figures?
At the time of the preparation of the NEP,
Yes.
the reconciliation has not yet been
Correct,
completed.
but it's just reconciliation. It's a mathematical computation. That is the wisdom. Because you have yet to compute or you have to make the numbers
Without such
tally.
Without such reconciliation, Madam Chair, the executive placed the
Can we not
amount
have a
in the
more
unprogrammed.
substantive reason? I always believe that wisdom bears substantive reason, not mathematical reason alone. All right, let me go to the AFP modernization. Okay, under the NEP for the 2024 GAA, the President proposed the whole amount of 50 billion for this item, but Congress split this amount by assigning 40 billion under programmed appropriations and 10 billion under unprogrammed appropriations. Madam Solicitor General, please lead us to the wisdom underlying the splitting of this item under two different categories of appropriation.
Your Honor, I do not have the reason of Congress in splitting it, Your Honor. It is our understanding that when we refer to the wisdom, we do not mean that the conclusion can be considered as wise, or can be considered as correct, or can be considered as sound. But when we say that that the judiciary differs to the wisdom of a co-equal branch, then whatever considerations becomes an issue that will be dependent on their standards. And so that's why even if we all agree that certain choices have been unsound, it's our position that it is not the issue that we are trying to give an answer
It's
to.
always an issue, wisdom. That's why we say untainted with grave abuse of discretion. When wisdom is invoked by word alone, by lip service, but the substantial part of it is unwise, then it is not wisdom. All right. So you invoke, Madam Solicitor. Okay, your excuse. Thank you. Solicitor General, the earmarking of different sources for programmed on one hand and unprogrammed on the other. Okay. To justify, all right, the unlimited amount that may be assigned under unprogrammed appropriation. Don't you think this is a superficial distinction, without which programmed and unprogrammed appropriations are one and the same, bearing the same features, except that programmed appropriations are made subject to constitutional limitations pertaining to the ceiling amount, while unprogrammed appropriations are made exempt from these limitations. It means while programmed appropriations have a ceiling, both visible and quantifiable, in contrast, for unprogrammed appropriations, sky is the limit.
Your Honor, I would refer to the history of the budget law, and which I think is the basis also of how our wordings in the Constitution has been this way. It appears, and it is curious also to us when we were looking at the beginning of the unprogrammed appropriation. At first, we thought that it just started in the 1989 GAA, but it appears that it predated the 1987 Constitution. So it goes into the fiscal policy of the executive. It goes into the fiscal space that they are trying to be disciplined about. And because of the responsibility of Congress to identify if ever there will be additional funds to already have the ready appropriation, that is to our understanding why the unprogrammed appropriations have become to be an integral part.
Illimitable.
All we are saying, Your Honor, because the issue in this case is whether the unprogrammed appropriations is unconstitutional, and it is our position that it is not unconstitutional, and that there is no there's no text in the Constitution or no text in the Constitution that defines or limits the unprogrammed appropriation.
Correct. That's why that classification was provided. Apparently to skip this prohibition. At any rate, for me, it is a paradox. Unprogrammed appropriations are fixed, hence they have a ceiling. It is like purchasing from the department store. No haggling. The prices are fixed. On the other hand, unprogrammed appropriations have no fixed ceiling price. Pretty much like a tiangge. Haggling is the name of the game. Pwede tumawad. Okay. Now, my position is the artificial distinction between programmed and unprogrammed appropriations. For me, it has a lot to do with our budget deficit. Okay, so may I ask again the good representative of the DBM to please respond to this question. In 2024, how much was our budget deficit?
Your Honor, the DBM ASEC Angel is requesting if we could ask the representative of the DBCC.
What is DBCC? It's like a radio station.
The Development Budget Coordinating
All
Committee.
right. Yes,
Your
yes,
Honor.
please come. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honors.
Yes.
My name is
Good morning.
Romy Balangkit from the DBM, and I'm the chair of the DBCC Executive Technical Board. DBCC stands for Development Budget Coordination Committee, wherein its members are the economic managers, Your Honor.
Yes.
And they're responsible for targeting the deficit program over the medium term.
Yes. So my question was, how much was our budget deficit in 2024?
Around 1.5 trillion,
Yes.
Madam
So
Chair.
was the government able to cover this entirely?
Yes, but we even exceeded our deficit to GDP target of something like 5.6, and we breached it to 5.7, unfortunately.
So we had extra money?
Yes.
Yes. Where did you use the extra funds that we generated?
Okay, so...
So we had a deficit and we were able to cover the deficit within the fiscal year
Yes.
in 2024.
Yes,
Yes.
that's correct, ma'am. Because
So where did we source the funding for the deficit?
Okay, so the Treasury, when it borrows money, either from inside or outside, it would be using money for deficit financing and also for paying the principal amount.
Alright, so nangungutang tayo
Nangungutang tayo, ma'am, para
may
punuan
pambayad tayo
sa hindi kayang mapunan
sa hindi
ng
natin
BIR.
kayang
I-collect,
punuan.
yes.
So,
At saka-
gumagastos tayo ng sobra-sobra sa ating kita.
Yes, nangyayari po yun. Nangyayari
oo.
po
Lagi
yun.
bang nangyayari yun?
Last year, we breached also the deficit.
We breached because we
deficit.
borrowed.
We borrowed, yes.
Yes.
We borrowed.
Magkanong inutang natin? Kung di tayo imutang, meron pa rin tayong deficit.
Lagi po tayong may deficit.
Lagi tayong may utang.
Hanggang 2030, ang target po ng DBCC ay may deficit pa rin, but ang kailangan mangyari is yung deficit GDP ratio should be a downward trajectory. Kasi habang meron tayong deficit, tumataas pa rin yung accumulated debt natin. But it should
Natural.
it should not actually worry us if the expenses that we are using for the borrowings that we are getting from abroad or from domestic would be used for increasing the size of the economy. So maganda pong tingnan, Your Honor, na yung debt over GDP, dapat bumabagsak din po yan, pababa ng pababa, over the medium term. So meaning, nothing to worry if the accumulated deficit or debt is increasing for as long as the size of the economy is also increasing.
Nothing to worry.
That's the position of the economic managers because we've been running
Nothing to worry.
at a deficit.
Kahit na mag-deficit, kahit na malubog tayo sa utang, okay lang. Basta nag-grow yung economy natin.
At nakakapagbayad po tayo, ma'am.
Nakakapagbayad tayo ng principal and interest.
Correct po, ma'am.
Okay. So, yung mga utang na yan, kailangan iutang kasi hindi natin ginagamit yung sources for the unprogrammed appropriations. Diba? Kung walang divide, kung hindi natin nilagyan ng category, o ito para to sa utang, itong isa naman ito para ito sa unprogrammed funds. Kung nawala yung ganong divide, unahin natin yung pag-cover ng budget deficit natin. Covering the program funds. Kasi priority natin yun, di ba?
Correct po, ma'am.
Okay. Sabi nyo nga, standby lang yung ano natin. Pero ang nangyayari, mas inuuna nating punuan yung unprogrammed funds. Hindi ba? Tama.
Kasi po, sa DBM yung nangyayari.
Kasi pinaghiwalay natin yung sources. Pinaghiwalay. Yun ang sinasabi ko na parang superficial lang. Just to justify the funding for unprogrammed funds. Iniiwas natin siya sa budget deficit. Pero talaga namang related yan sa budget deficit natin. Diba? Kasi lahat ng pang-cover natin sa budget deficit, inuutang din lang naman natin. Samantalang, yung mga nagko-cover ng UA, hindi natin yun inuutang lahat. Hindi ba meron tayong excess tax collection? Do meron ding utang.
Meron din po, ma'am.
Kaya nga, pareho lang